I have this curse, guys, where no matter how many cookies I try and make, I always end up with 19. This recipe was supposed to make 35 cookies, and I have 19, and like they're the size it said to make them. Does this happen to anyone else? Why do I always have 19 cookies? Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel. I love doing things as efficiently as possible so that I have more time to do absolutely nothing. So today I'm going to make a video reviewing Hidden Sea, A Tale of the Once and Future Nutcracker by Gregory Maguire. And I'm also going to make marzipan Christmas cookies because who doesn't want marzipan Christmas cookies? And if I can film a video while also getting my Christmas baking done, like that's more time to sit on the couch and eat cookies. These are a German marzipan Christmas cookie recipe from the Daring Gourmet. I will link that recipe down below. Before we start, as always, we've got the ingredients. Some marzipan that I already weighed out, almond meal and a little bit of flour, icing sugar, egg white. It calls for rose water, but I couldn't find any, and also nothing else I make uses rose water, so I'm going to use some almond extract and water because I figure almond extract is stronger than rose water. And then finally some egg wash for the top. And that's it. These seem like pretty basic cookies. They don't seem too complicated, so hopefully it goes well. I try and pick ones that I think are gonna go well when I'm doing it on camera. Step one is to take our marzipan and break into small pieces. What are small pieces? I don't know. But we're gonna break up this marzipan and let's get into what this book is actually about. It's essentially the life story of Drosselmeyer, who's the godfather in the Nutcracker, who actually brings Clara, the little girl, the Nutcracker toy. Disclaimer, I'm not very familiar with the Nutcracker, so everything I say about this comes from this book and the Wikipedia article I read while writing this review. Let me know if there's stuff that maybe I would have felt differently about if I had read the actual fairy tale or seen the ballet or something. We follow him from his childhood deep in the Black Forest in the early 1800s, where he's a foundling and is raised by a mysterious old man and old woman who maybe aren't as old as he thought, but they seemed very old when he was a child. Then he's raised by a minister for a while. He goes and works as sort of a servant and an assistant. And over the course of the book, we learn how he eventually came to be an old man and a toy maker, and also the godfather of the little girl from the story. The next step is to basically add all of the ingredients all at once, so that's what we're going to do now. Now, unfortunately, I didn't love this book, but I think that's at least in part because of an issue of expectation. I thought that this was going to be a retelling of the fairy tale of the Nutcracker, and I'm going to read you part of the blurb to explain why. The blurb that I read said, "Hidden Sea imagines the backstory of the Nutcracker, revealing how this entrancing creature came to be carved and how he guided an alien girl named Clara through a dreamy paradise on a Christmas Eve. At the heart of the mysterious tale hovers Godfather Drosselmeyer, the ominous, canny, one-eyed toy maker made immortal by Petipa and Tchaikovsky's fairy tale ballet, who presents the once and future Nutcracker to Clara, his goddaughter." Now, the blurb also says that it's inspired by the Nutcracker, but having read that, would you not assume that this was about the story of the Nutcracker and the little girl? Drosselmeyer doesn't hover at the center of the story. He is the center of this story. He's the protagonist. He's the character that we follow all the way through, from his early childhood through his death. He doesn't lurk. He's not on the edges. In respect to this story, he's the main character. Maybe I would have felt differently if this story was framed as the story of this guy's life, but as it was, I was just reading and going, when do we get to the part about the Nutcracker? The Nutcracker isn't even created or carved until over halfway through the book, and even after that, he spends most of the second half just sort of chilling out in a bag, being a piece of wood. We never see any character from him. We don't get... It's very strange. That blurb made me think we were going to see him come to life and have an interaction and be a fundamental character in the story. But he's really not. It's entirely about Drosselmeyer, and then we see the actual Nutcracker fairy tale from his perspective. We don't even really get a retelling of the Nutcracker part, we just hear how he experienced it from the outside. I think it might have been intentional that we see the story of the Nutcracker from an old man's perspective and we see an adult's perspective of this fairy tale, because childhood and the loss of childhood and the fact that we can never return to childhood is a major theme in this book. I have no idea how this is going to come together because there's basically no liquid in it, but I'm just gonna keep mixing at this and see how it turns out, I guess. It dwells a lot on how as children, even though we're physically in the same world as adults, we're sort of inhabiting a different world of our own that adults can't enter. So of course, as adults, we can't experience this story the way that Clara does because she's a child and the reader is hopefully an adult, or at least a teenager. I also thought it was really interesting that it really wasn't clear to me whether it was actual magic or like dreams and hallucination type magic stuff. And the further we got from Drosselmeyer's childhood, the more I found that to be the case, which was really interesting. And I think that did make sense. On this topic, however, it was just one of those things where I could tell that this was an important theme of the book, and I could tell that I was supposed to be thinking about this, and that this was something important and big and like I should be paying attention to, but I didn't really get where it was going. And I didn't really feel like it had any sort of, I don't want to say payout, but like, I'm not really sure where it went in the end, or what McGuire was trying to say about this. It was sort of, you could tell he was trying to say something, but I'm not sure what exactly the message was that he was trying to get across. I didn't think it was going to work, but I stirred with my hands, and this did in fact come together into a sticky ball of dough, which now needs to chill in the fridge for an hour, so we're gonna do that. While that chills, I want to talk about what I think are, other than my expectations, the reasons I didn't like this book, because a book can be different from what you expect and still be awesome. That was not this book. Hidden Sea suffers from both poor pacing and an uncompelling protagonist. As I mentioned above, the Nutcracker doesn't even enter the story until over halfway through. Up until that point, we're basically just following Drosselmeyer's childhood and teenage years, which could be fine. That could be interesting. We could be learning about him and learning about his experiences, which, I mean, I guess technically is what we're doing, but he's just not an interesting protagonist. He doesn't really form any meaningful relationships with anybody until the last quarter or so of the book, maybe, at which point we finally start to see him actually having interactions with people and getting a bit of back and forth play, so that was a bit of interesting, but none of that in the first half. He doesn't have any sort of direction in life, and I don't just mean that in a he doesn't know what he wants to do with the rest of his life career way, more that he's a protagonist who doesn't seem to want anything. He's not trying to get anywhere, or trying to get someone, or trying to get something, or trying to accomplish a task, or anything. He just exists. And when the world pushes him in one direction, he goes along with it and doesn't sort of express much unhappiness or happiness either way. Essentially, he has very little inner life, at least to my reading. And he doesn't really interact with the outside world that much. He exists in the outside world, but he's not actively doing things or forming relationships with people in it. I guess it just really comes down to, it's really hard to get invested in a book that's so focused on the protagonist, where the protagonist isn't invested in anything. Maybe this is just me, but I feel like I need the protagonist to want something, or to be feeling something. This does improve in the second half of the book, where he starts to form a more long-term relationship with this family, so we see him interacting with people on a regular basis, we see him interacting with people over time, we get their side a little bit, so we get people who are a bit emotionally invested in what's going on. But on the whole, it just wasn't a compelling or engaging protagonist pacing combination. As a short story, this could have been really interesting probably, because it's 20 pages and you don't have to get that into it. But if you're gonna make it a novel this long, something has to happen. Especially if you're having readers hit the halfway mark and go, how is this at all related to what the topic of this book is? Okay, the dough's chilled in the fridge for an hour and a half now. It was supposed to be an hour, I got cut up in my book. It happens. And it's time to roll it into little balls. At this point, basically I've made marzipan with a bit of flour in it. So I took marzipan, added more marzipan ingredients, plus like 1/3 of a cup of flour. Let's see how this bakes up. I have no idea how it's going to turn out. In an attempt to be fair to this book though, I think part of the reason I didn't appreciate it as much as I might have was because I listened to an audiobook. I think for me, audiobooks aren't the right format for works where I want to think critically and think deeply and mark things up and then go back and reread sections at the end and I've got a different perspective on it. I found that that was the case with this book. I wish I had a physical copy that I could have heavily annotated and used, many different colors of pen and highlighter on to mark up things that I thought were significant so that I could reflect on them at the end. And audiobooks are much more transitory. You listen, but There's not even any way of like highlighting like I do on my ebook. You just listen and then it's gone unless you're sitting there writing it down. For me, audiobooks are something I listen to when I go for walks or when I'm cleaning the apartment or doing things. I'm not someone who can just sit and listen. Maybe I'm not being fair to this book because of that. I still don't think I would have loved it. I just think maybe I would have understood the big themes a bit better if I had been able to read it that way. Essentially, the experience I had was as I was reading, there's all sorts of things where I was like, I can tell that this is important. I can tell that there's something going on with this, but I wasn't really sure what it was or how it was all related. There were various elements that I was reading along and going, this feels significant, this feels important, I feel like I should be understanding something here or getting something out of this. But I wasn't quite sure what it was, and it was sort of out of place, and I didn't really get it. I've been saying that so much, but that's sort of the feeling I had. Like, there was something I was supposed to understand and didn't. One key example of this is the Greek myth about a lost forest and the creatures who live there. It's central to the book. It shows up again and again. We spend a lot of time talking about it. The motifs keep coming up, but I didn't understand why it was there. This book is so German, and it's so based in German folk tales and fairy tales and things like that, that having this Greek myth be the root of all of it just seemed really strange. I think that that was included because there was an element in the book of, in the time where the book was set, there was a resurgence of interest in Greek mythology and stuff like that, but it just didn't carry through for me. It's one of those books that I hesitate to be too hard on. Sometimes I read a book and I don't like it, and it's like, no, just objectively this wasn't the book for me. It wasn't to my taste. I didn't enjoy reading it. I'm fine saying, didn't like it, let's move on. With this one, it's got me just questioning of, was it just not to my taste and that's why I didn't like it, which is fine, or am I being too hard on it because I didn't get it? Or because there was some theme or message or something that I didn't pick up on that if I'd done a more careful reading, maybe I would have? I don't have an answer here at all. The cookies are baked, they've been sampled, so it's time to wrap up this video. What can I say about Hidden Sea? It was fine. I'm not unhappy to have read it. I'm glad I finished it and saw the ending, but it just wasn't that great, and I didn't find anything special in it, and I didn't find anything in it that I found particularly interesting or compelling. So it was meh. Have you read it? Did you like it? Have you read other of Gregory Maguire's books? Because I know he wrote the book that inspired the musical Wicked, and he's done a bunch of these like fairy tale reimagining things, and they're very beloved. So have you read other of his works? Is it worth checking out other books? Let me know down below. Thankfully, the cookies are much better. They're absolutely nothing to look at. It's on manual focus, you probably won't see it that well. They're very pale too, but basically they're warm marzipan. What can you object to with that? They're delicious. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a very, very Merry Christmas. If you're celebrating other holidays in December, happy holidays. I wish all the best to you and your family. And I hope you're finding a little bit of joy and light in this season, even if everything around us is kind of crazy. And since that's more sentimentality than I usually try and include in these, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up down below. If you would like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.